Hello students. So in this chapter, that is unit number 2, we will see the introduction to the networking. So what is actually networking? Why we use networking? What is the basic concept? Why was networking done? How do we do the networking? Then what are the various devices for networking? Then what are the various topologies, then the devices, then the wires, cables, connectors, all these things we will study in this particular chapter of networking and internet. So why the networking came into existence? What was the requirement? What is the need of networking? Let us go and let us see. So as we know, in the beginning of civilization, the humans communicated. How did the human communicate? They communicated via just speaking, that is oral, or using various gestures or touch. Okay, so what is actually communication? Communication is the sharing of one's ideas, feelings, emotions with one another. So during the early times, they were just oral gestures and touch, etc. So knowledge transcended from one generation to another, largely by the way of oral tradition. So in the previous times, it was just oral mode of communication. Then came the written mode. In written, the first was using inscriptions on stones and all, stones, metals, etc. Until the early form of papers were developed. Okay, firstly we had the oral method, then came the written method. In written, there was inscriptions on stones and metals, etc., until the early forms of paper was developed. After that, then came the evolution of the printing press. Okay, so the education now remained largely confined to the elite until there was invention of the printing press by Johannes Gutenberg around 1440. So what happened after the invention of printing press? The communication became much more easier to a large area. It covered large area. Many people could communicate with each other via various methods such as newspapers, books, which provided a new and versatile method of communication of information. Then after that, the next, in the 19th century, what happened? There was an era of telegraph and telephone, which made the communication much more fast and much more easier as compared to the written communication or the printed material also, as we can communicate from one place to other place orally from to a large distance. By sitting at one place, we could communicate using the telegraph and telephonic conversation. Then in the 20th century, we saw the development of commercially viable radio and television. Okay, then came the evolution of the new technology, that is radio and television, which became instrumental in dissemination of information and entertainment also. So we could hear the news, we could have various musics, entertainment, all came into existence with the invention of radio and television. ARPANET, that began with a network connecting computers in a few organizations in early 60s, paved the way for internet. So who paved the way for the existence of internet is ARPANET. Okay, in the early 80s, that revolutionized not only the exchange of information amongst various individual and organization, but also the way the organization do the business and people educate, entertain and organize themselves. Social networking, as we know that these days, it is being used by lot of people. That helps in communication. How? Because due to this networking only. If there was no networks, then such kind of communication was not possible. So did the networking came into existence? As we know that in the previous or at the early stages, human used the oral communication. Then came the written. In written, they used inscription on stones, etc. Then came the invention of paper, where paper were used. Then the invention of the printing press, where the newspapers and books were printed and communication became much more easier. Then after that, telegraph and telephone, which made the communication much more easier as compared to newspapers and telegraph, etc. Newspaper and books, etc. And then in this era, that is 20th century, the in the era of the 20th century, the radio and television became the instrumental part where the information could be easily received by the receiver. Also, we can get various entertainment programs via the radio and television. ARPANET was the basic organization which led to the way for internet. Information among the various individuals and organization. Then it also decided how the way of organization do the business and how to educate the people, entertain. All the social networking, instant messaging, voice calls nowadays that we are using is because of this networking only.